My name is Rita Johnson. I'm 34 years old, and I live just outside Dayton, Ohio. I work in logistics, a job that's neither glamorous nor simple, but it keeps the lights on and gives my son, Caleb, a stable home. I'm a divorced mom, the kind who's learned to stretch a dollar until it sings. Caleb is 7, all bright eyes and boundless questions. He thinks the world runs on pancakes and Lego bricks. I wish it did. It all began one quiet Sunday afternoon at my mother's dining table, where the smell of overcooked pot roast and the clinking of forks set the mood for what she liked to call family discussions. "We all agreed to keep birthdays low-key this year," Mom said, her voice coated in authority, like it was a rule written on stone tablets. My dad nodded behind his newspaper. My younger sister, Brittany, chimed in with her sugar-sweet voice. "That's such a great idea, Mom. We've been overdoing it anyway." I smiled faintly, feeling a small wave of relief. After the divorce, I'd been walking a financial tightrope. A low-key celebration sounded like mercy. For once, I thought, maybe we could just focus on time together instead of who spent the most. When Caleb's birthday rolled around in March, I kept my promise to simplicity. We baked a lopsided chocolate cake together, laughed when the frosting slid sideways, and spent the afternoon at the park. I gave him a used scooter I found on Facebook Marketplace, and he thought it was the coolest thing in the world. My parents brought snacks and a puzzle. Brittany arrived empty-handed, saying she'd forgotten his gift at home. Caleb didn't notice. I did. 2 months later came the twins' 8th birthday, Brittany's kids. Caleb and I showed up with a small gift bag, 2 $10 Lego sets, and a handmade card he'd colored himself. I remember how proud he was, how carefully he'd spelled each twin's name. But as soon as we turned onto Brittany's street, I knew something was wrong. The yard looked like a carnival had exploded. Balloons, banners, a bounce house wobbling in the breeze. There was even a snow cone stand and an ice cream truck parked out front. Inside, the living room looked like Christmas morning at a celebrity mansion, towering piles of designer boxes, expensive gadgets, and bright wrapping paper covering the floor. "Wow," I said under my breath. Brittany grinned, twirling her champagne glass. "Oh, it's just a small thing for the kids." I handed her our little gift bag. She barely glanced at it. "Thanks." 10 minutes later, her twins were ripping open iPads, Yeezy hoodies, and AirPods. Parents clapped and snapped photos. Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor, watching in silence. He didn't pout, didn't cry. He just stared at the pile of luxury while clutching his handmade card in his lap. I saw his small fists clench, and something inside me twisted. My dad caught my eye and murmured, "Don't make a scene, Rita." I smiled, swallowed hard, and whispered, "We're fine." I helped Caleb with his jacket and told him we were going for ice cream. He nodded, still silent. Still. We drove home in the quiet hum of the car. Caleb looked out the window, his reflection small and solemn. I tried to think of what to say, but all that came out was, "We'll do something fun this weekend, okay?" He nodded again. That was all. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat in the living room with the lights off. The silence felt heavier than usual. My laptop screen glowed on the coffee table, showing my bank app. Every month, hundreds of dollars left my account for bills that weren't mine. My parents' mortgage, their utilities, the temporary help that somehow became permanent. When Dad lost his job during the pandemic, I had restructured their mortgage and set it up under my name just for a few months. 3 years later, I was still paying it. And Brittany? She'd borrowed money for emergencies more times than I could count. Rent, daycare, Etsy shop ads, each promise to pay me back soon had turned into dust. I stared at the screen and felt a strange stillness settle in. It wasn't rage. Rage burns fast. This was colder, sharper, a clarity that hums. At 10:41 p.m., I moved my cursor, opened the banking tab, and disabled the mortgage autopay. Click. Done. No message, no warning. Just silence and relief. By morning, my phone looked like it had exploded. 71 missed calls, dozens of voicemails, and a stream of frantic texts. Mom, "Rita, something's wrong with the bank." Dad, "Did you mess up the autopay?" Brittany, "Why are you doing this?" At 7:15 a.m., as I poured my coffee, I saw flashing lights reflecting off my kitchen window. A sheriff's cruiser sat idling at the end of my driveway. I opened the door before he could knock. "Good morning, ma'am. Are you Rita Johnson?" "Yes." He checked his notes. "We received a report of property theft, a 2014 Toyota Highlander." I blinked. "You're kidding." The burgundy Highlander sat in my driveway, the same car Brittany claimed she had given me after my old Camry died. The truth? I'd taken over the payments when she wanted to sell it. Over the next year, I'd sent $6,000 directly to her husband, Tyler. I paid the insurance, repairs, registration, everything. But whenever I asked about transferring the title, she'd wave me off. "We'll get to it." I went inside, grabbed my laptop, and showed the officer proof: payment receipts, screenshots of texts, and even a voicemail from Tyler thanking me for taking it off our hands. He scrolled quietly, then looked up. "Has there been a disagreement recently?" I gave a small, cold smile. "You could say that." He nodded slowly. "I'll note this as a false report, but just in case, keep your doors locked for a few days." When he left, I stood there holding my laptop like it weighed 50 pounds. My phone kept buzzing on the counter. Mom, Dad, Brittany, Tyler, over and over. Something in me shifted. It wasn't panic. It wasn't heartbreak. It was a switch flipping. For years, I'd been their safety net, the helper, the problem solver, the one who never complained. And now they'd branded me a thief. I looked at the Highlander one last time. Then I grabbed a trash bag, emptied everything out: Caleb's booster seat, a hoodie, a bag of coins from the cup holder, and drove it straight to Brittany's driveway. I parked crooked, left the keys sealed in a Ziploc on her porch, and texted her one line: "You want it so bad? Come get it." Then I went home, shut the curtains, and pulled out a stack of gray folders from my closet. Inside were receipts, transfers, old emails, even texts from my parents asking for help. I spread them across my kitchen table like evidence in a trial. I started a list: not revenge, records, everything I'd given, everything still in my name, everything I was about to take back. It wasn't anger, it was precision, the kind that builds inside a woman who's been underestimated too long. And this time, I wasn't just keeping score, I was closing the books. The next morning, the air in my house felt different, quiet, but not peaceful, like the calm that comes right before a storm decides which direction to roll. I sipped my coffee and stared at the Highlander's empty spot in the driveway. For the first time in years, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. That small victory tasted bitter and clean. After breakfast, I opened the gray folders again. Inside were pieces of my own history that I'd been too tired to look at, proof that I'd been holding up half my family's world while they stood on my shoulders. Bank transfers, Venmo screenshots, utility bills in my name, even emails from my parents asking, "Can you cover this month's payment just until Dad's check clears?" I made a spreadsheet, because logistics is what I do when emotions threaten to take over. Mortgage, storage unit, family phone plan, Etsy business. One by one, I listed every financial thread tying me to them. It was like looking at the web that had trapped me and realizing I had been the spider and the prey. The storage unit was next. I'd almost forgotten about it until I saw the $167 charge buried in my banking app. Years ago, Mom had asked me to rent it temporarily to store her crafting junk: bolts of fabric, paint cans, half-finished DIY projects. Then Brittany had started using it too, filling the space with her kids' old toys. And month after month, I'd paid for their clutter without thinking. So I drove there. The manager, a tired man with a clipboard, asked for my ID. When I told him I wanted to cancel, he raised an eyebrow. "You've had that unit for 5 years." "I know," I said, sliding the key across the counter. "They've got 2 weeks to clear it out. After that, auction it." He hesitated, then nodded. "You sure?" I smiled, a calm I didn't recognize settling in, completely. By the time I got home, there were 22 new messages from my family. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I opened an old email account I hadn't touched in ages, the one I used to help Brittany set up her Etsy shop. Back when she was too busy to handle business stuff, I'd registered everything under my name: tax ID, PayPal, even the shipping address. She'd promised to take it over, said it was too much paperwork, so I forgot about it. But when I logged in, the shop was still running. New orders, customer messages, glowing reviews, the balance, 3,862,019. All of it in my account, all of it made through my name, my tax number. I scrolled through the order list. Personalized mugs, baby blankets, gift boxes. The shop hadn't slowed down at all. Brittany had simply stopped telling me about it. For a long minute, I just sat there, watching the number on the screen like it might morph into something else. Then I changed the password, removed her address, and transferred the money to my personal checking. Legally, it was mine anyway. Emotionally, it was the first time in years that taking back felt cleaner than giving in. By evening, I was drained but lighter. Caleb and I walked to the 24-hour diner a few blocks away. He ordered pancakes even though it wasn't breakfast, and I didn't stop him. He told me about a squirrel that tried to steal his granola bar at recess. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. For once, we weren't talking about my parents, or Brittany, or bills. Just pancakes, syrup, and his plan to be a scientist who also owns a zoo. When we got home, the porch light was out, but a cardboard box sat on the step, plain, unmarked. I felt a cold prickle crawl up my spine. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen table. The tape was sloppy, like someone had done it in the dark. Inside were the 2 Lego sets Caleb and I had given Brittany's twins. Not in their boxes anymore, just pieces, crushed, one half melted. The smell of burned plastic was unmistakable. There was no note, no explanation, just the silent message that only family can craft with such cruelty. I stood there, staring at the mess. Caleb wandered in from the hallway, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, what's that?" "Nothing," I said softly, pushing the box lid closed before he could see. "Just something that doesn't belong here anymore." When he went back to bed, I sealed the box shut with fresh tape, grabbed my keys, and drove. The night was quiet, heavy with humidity. At Brittany's house, every window was dark except one upstairs, the twins' room. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I left the box on her doorstep, right where she'd left her decency. No text, no note, no goodbye. As I drove home, the streetlights flickered across my windshield like flashes of understanding. There are 2 kinds of people in this world, the ones who drain you and the ones who fill you back up. My family had mistaken my kindness for a power source. They forgot I could pull the plug. That night, before I went to sleep, I opened my notebook and wrote at the top of a clean page, "Everything they took, everything I'm reclaiming." Underneath, I listed 3 names, Brittany, Mom, Dad. Beside each, I wrote one word in capital letters, enough. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought it was an emergency. Then I saw the group chat name, Family Updates. I hadn't seen a message in that thread for months, not since the birthday agreement. The first text was from Mom, written like a speech at a town hall. "Rita, I'm heartbroken. I don't understand why you're attacking everyone over a misunderstanding. We all love you, but this behavior is unacceptable. You've humiliated the family." I scrolled down, paragraph after paragraph. She even claimed the broken Lego sets were an accident. "The twins were just playing rough," she wrote. Then came the line that made me stop cold. "You need to remember everything we've done for you." That was her favorite line, a lifetime membership in emotional debt. I dropped my phone on the table and laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Everything they'd ever taken from me had been repackaged as generosity. Every sacrifice turned into a debt I supposedly owed forever. That afternoon, I opened my banking app again. 2 more active subscriptions sat there, their cable package and Mom's monthly makeup box, 2 7-tons combined, small but symbolic. Cancel, cancel. The clicks echoed louder than I expected. Around 5 p.m., someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, a man in a cheap gray suit stood there, holding a clipboard. "Ms. Johnson?" "Yes?" "I'm with Premier Recovery Services. Your mother, Diane Johnson, hired us to collect $4,100 in owed support for living expenses and vehicle costs." For a moment, I just stared at him. Then I smiled politely. "Tell her to send the invoice to my lawyer," I said, and shut the door in his face. Behind it, my heart pounded, not from fear, but disbelief. My own mother had hired a debt collector to come after me. I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I sat on the floor, laughing until it hurt. Somewhere between absurdity and clarity, I realized something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was war, and they'd fired the first real shot. That night, I opened a new notebook and drew a hard line down the center of the page. On the left, what they owe me. On the right, what I owe them. The right column stayed blank. Then I opened a fresh note on my laptop. Operation Clean Slate. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd play documented. First task, return everything they ever claimed as theirs. I went through my apartment, room by room. The air fryer Mom had bought me with my own money. The blender Brittany loaned me 2 years ago. Dad's old toolbox I'd been guilted into keeping. Gifts that were really traps. By midnight, my trunk was full of their things, every object that carried an invisible string. I drove to my parents' house. The porch light was on, faint yellow bleeding through the screen door. I didn't ring the bell. I just stacked the boxes neatly against the railing, silent, methodical. When I got back home, the front yard was dark except for the reflection of something metallic by the curb. I stepped closer and froze. It was Caleb's old stroller, the one he used until he was 3. Cut clean in half. Rain had begun to fall, soaking into the fabric, turning it into a sagging, lifeless shape. My breath hitched. It wasn't random vandalism, it was a message. My phone buzzed again. A new text from Brittany. Seriously, over a birthday party? Then Mom followed with a novel of blame. You're being childish. Family doesn't keep score. We're still your parents. And finally, Dad, just one line. You'll be hearing from a lawyer. I stared at the screen, rain pounding the windows, thunder rolling somewhere distant. Then I typed one response and sent it to all 3. I have a lawyer too, and a folder with every receipt. Make your next move carefully. Then I took a photo of the broken stroller, printed it, and slid it into the gray folder labeled Evidence, Family Harassment. When you've been the peacekeeper your whole life, the moment you stop, people call it cruelty. But sometimes silence isn't cruel, sometimes it's protection. The storm outside kept me awake for hours. Every flash of lightning painted the stroller in sharp white light, a ghost of what used to be love. By morning, I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't even angry, just done. I poured coffee, opened my email, and drafted a message to Dan, my divorce attorney. Subject: New case. Family harassment. Hey Dan, it's Rita. I think we need to talk. Then I attached screenshots, receipts, and photos of the stroller. When I hit send, I felt something shift. Not a victory, not yet, but the first moment of peace that didn't come from anyone's permission. By the time I sat across from Dan, my lawyer, 2 days later, I had everything in order. I'd spent hours labeling files, sorting receipts, and attaching dates to every message. When you grow up in a family that twists the truth, you learn that documentation is survival. Dan flipped through the folder, his eyes widening. Rita, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is harassment, and financial exploitation on top of it. I figured. He exhaled, tapping the papers into a neat stack. You've got more evidence than most civil cases I see. If they keep contacting you, I'll send a cease and desist. If they try legal action, they'll lose before they start. For the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders unclench. Do it, I said simply. That evening, after Caleb fell asleep, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop again. 2 things still tied me to them, the family phone plan and Netflix. The smallest conveniences were always their favorite leashes. I opened the mobile account first. 6 lines. Mom, Dad, Brittany, Tyler, and me. One by one, I clicked Remove Line. Confirm. 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 When I reached my own name, I paused, then switched the plan to a personal one under my account. Then came Netflix. I logged in, changed the password, and renamed the main profile, No More Free Rides. It was petty maybe, but God, it felt good. I closed the laptop and stared at the reflection of my own face in the dark screen. Tired, yes, but no longer scared. The next morning, the text began again. Brittany, are you serious right now? Mom, you're acting like a stranger. We raised you better than this. Dad, grow up, Rita. I ignored them all. I'd given them years of explanations, and every word had been weaponized against me. Silence was my new language. That afternoon, I got an email from Dan confirming the cease and desist had been sent to all 3 of them. The subject line read, Reed Johnson Family Communications, Official Notice. For the first time, it wasn't just me drawing the line, it was legal. That night, I gathered the last of the boxes, Brittany's blender, Dad's old tools, Mom's decor, and loaded them into the back of my car. Caleb watched from the doorway, holding his stuffed bear. Are we moving again, Mom? I smiled softly. No, sweetheart, we're just returning what never belonged here. He nodded like he understood, because maybe, in his quiet way, he did. The drive to my parents' house was quiet. Every streetlight flickered like punctuation marks on a sentence I was finally finishing. When I pulled up, the porch looked the same as always. Warm light, potted flowers, a doormat that said, Home is where the heart is. I parked at the curb, carried each box up the steps, and set them down one by one. No knock, no goodbye. On the way back, I passed Brittany's house. Her blinds were closed, but the glow of a TV bled through. For a second, I wondered if she was watching something on my old Netflix account before it logged her out mid-episode. The thought almost made me laugh. When I got home, Evan was waiting in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with 2 mugs of tea. "You sure you don't want me to talk to them?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "No, I've talked enough for 10 years. He studied me for a long moment. "You don't look angry anymore." "I'm not," I said quietly. "Just done being their safety net." He smiled, half sad, half proud. "You know, done can be a beautiful place to land." We stood there for a while in silence, the hum of the fridge the only sound between us. It wasn't the cinematic kind of silence, just the simple kind that feels earned. Later that night, when I finally crawled into bed, I noticed how light the air felt. No anxiety, no tension crawling up my spine, just stillness. The next morning, my phone didn't buzz at all. No missed calls, no messages, just quiet. And yet, I knew that silence was temporary. When people lose control over you, they don't disappear, they regroup. So I prepared for the next knock, the next guilt trip, the next manipulation. Not out of fear, but out of readiness. Before leaving for work, I taped a note to my fridge. Peace doesn't need permission. It was small, but it reminded me that this wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming peace. That evening, when Caleb came home from school, he handed me a drawing, a stick figure of us, standing under a big blue house with sunshine in the corner. Above it, in his careful handwriting, he wrote, "Me and Mom, just us, happy." I taped it to the fridge right beneath my note. For the first time in years, I believed both could be true. A week passed without a single word from them. No texts, no calls, no guilt-laced voicemails pretending to be concern. It was eerie at first, like the eye of a storm that had finally rolled past. But silence has a way of teaching you things. I realized how much noise they had taken up in my life, and how peaceful it felt to finally breathe without their voices echoing in my head. One afternoon, as I was helping Caleb with his science homework, someone knocked on the door. My stomach tightened. Through the peephole, I saw Brittany, alone, no Tyler, no parents. She was holding a manila envelope. For a moment, I considered not answering. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door a crack. She looked different, tired, maybe even humbled. "I'm not here to fight," she said quickly. I wanted to give you this." She handed me the envelope, eyes flicking down to avoid mine. "You win," she whispered. Then she turned and walked back to her car before I could say a word. Inside the envelope were 5 checks, each labeled in neat handwriting. Car, $6,000 Etsy, $3,862.19. Storage, $167 utilities, $2,300, and one last one labeled everything else, $10,000. There was also a short note written in Brittany's curvy defensive script. "Rita, Mom, and Dad are furious. They said not to do this, but I can't live like that anymore. I'm sorry for what I did and for how we treated you. You didn't deserve it. Maybe someday we'll talk again. Or maybe not. But I hope you find peace. Brittany." I stood there for a long time, staring at the checks. My heart didn't leap. There was no satisfaction, no triumphant scorecard moment. Just a quiet sadness for everything that had been burned in the process. I took a deep breath, tore each check in half, and dropped them into the trash. Because this was never about money. It was about respect, something you can't cash. That night, I told Evan what happened over the phone. He was silent for a few seconds before saying softly, "You didn't lose them, Rita. They lost the version of you who kept letting it happen." He was right. After hanging up, I made hot chocolate for Caleb, and we sat on the couch under his blanket, fort made of mismatched sheets and chair legs. He grinned proudly as he switched on the fairy lights we'd strung across the top. "It's our castle," he said. "It is," I smiled, "and we don't need a crown to live in it." Later, we ordered pizza, stayed up too late watching a movie, and when I looked at him, mouth smudged with chocolate, eyes fighting sleep, I realized something beautiful. For the first time, my peace wasn't borrowed. It was mine. Days turned into weeks. The debt collector sent one final letter, case withdrawn. The legal cease and desist had done its job. No more calls, no fake threats, no manipulation. I started redecorating our apartment, sold the couch my father once called technically still his, bought a new one in a soft ocean blue, let Caleb pick out new dishes with stars on them, took down the family photos that felt dishonest, and replaced them with art he made from construction paper and crayons. Healing wasn't loud. It didn't come with an apology dinner or a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet Sunday morning when I realized my phone hadn't buzzed all weekend, and I didn't miss it. It was the simple joy of Caleb's laughter bouncing off our kitchen walls, the soft hum of the coffee maker, the realization that peace didn't have to be earned. It just had to be protected. One evening, as the sun dipped low and gold light spilled across the living room, I sat with my notebook, the same one that once held a list of debts and names. I turned to the last page and wrote, "I didn't lose my family, I found myself." And for once, it wasn't just something I needed to believe, it was true. I closed the notebook, set it aside, and listened to the silence. It wasn't empty anymore, it was mine.